In this video, I'm going to be walking you through the first part of how you build a unit in Pen Wargame. If you've played other wargames before, this is going to be a brand new experience, and if you haven't, this is a super exciting start to what could be your first wargaming experience. To start, you're going to grab whatever miniature you have lying around that you want to play with. For our example, I'm going to use this Lego General Grievous that I have just because I love this miniature. It's so much fun. I loved playing with it as a kid, and I'd be super excited to field it in a battle in a war game. Then you're going to choose one of 4 unit types that you're going to be using in the battle. So these can be characters, squads, minions, and contraptions. Each have a slightly different purpose, and their skill sets and their abilities are going to look a little bit different depending on which one you choose. So we'll dive into each of those roles next. Characters, like our General Grievous friend, are going to be single models that are linchpins of your army. These are your generals, your commanders, your heroes, your epic sorcerers, even your politicians. If you have a Lego Emperor Palpatine figure, you could absolutely use that and give him certain battlefield effects that will still be influential and thematic for that character. These figures also have 25 to 100 millimeter bases, so there's a super wide range of models that you could field as characters. Now, each of these base size measurements are just recommendations, but they're helpful to keep in mind because you don't want your friend coming in with a model that takes up half the table and completely blocks you off from all of the objectives and stuff. So we do recommend that for whatever unit you're fielding, whether it's a character or one of the others, you at least consider that base size recommendation for competitiveness, but otherwise it's just a recommendation. Characters also get 14 skill points, which is the most of any of the different unit types, meaning that they're going to be able to do whatever it is that you want them to do better than pretty much any other unit on the battlefield. Again, that's kind of them being the best at whatever it is that they do. But they are one of the most costly. They cost 20 army points just for a single miniature, which, as you're going to see next, is the most of any of these models. Squads are going to be your real meat and potatoes of the battlefield. These are units of 5 to 20 different models that are going to be kind of the crux of whatever your strategy is. Keeping with our General Grievous example, these might be your super battle droids or your Genosian warrior, something like that, where they're just kind of the main battlefield focus, but they're a little bit stronger than kind of your chaff battle droids. These guys are going to have 25 to 50 millimeter bases, which again is just a recommendation, but it's a helpful one to keep in mind because when you get into these squads of larger units, they're going to have a larger footprint by default. And so you want to keep that in mind as you're building your strategy of how much of the board you're going to be taking over and how much you're going to have to interact with as you move this unit by. These squads only get 5 skill points each. So compared to the characters, these guys are going to be much more specialized, really only focusing in 1, maybe 2 skills that they're going to be really good at. And they're not generally going to be as survivable either. So you're going to be taking more of them, and they're going to be capable of doing more, but they're also going to take hits faster. Squads cost 10 army points per model, so they will cost as a whole more, but they also have the potential to do more just because there's more models there. And we'll get more into that when we look at conflict and resolving actions. Minions are just going to be your chaff units. They're there to fill up the space and throw a ton of shots that most likely won't do anything. To keep with our General Grievous example, your minions are going to be your battle droids. They might be manufactured by your other units, they might join as part of squads or bodyguard units depending on other units' abilities, but they as themselves really don't do a whole lot unless they're in huge quantities. They also have much smaller bases. Minion units only get 25 to 28 millimeter bases, again because you can take up to 40 of them in a single unit, so that's still a huge footprint on the battlefield that's being occupied just by these minions. They only get 3 skill points apiece, so again, they're really not going to be that effective. They're only going to be specializing in maybe 1 or 2 things, and they're not going to be very good at those 2 things. So you're going to be relying on them to hold objectives, to stick up your opponent, to throw a ton of shots that will be a last-ditch effort, things like that. And these guys only will cost 5 army points per model. So you're going to be looking at least 25 army points to field a squad of them. But again, that's only slightly more to field 5 models than it is to field a single model of a character. So just different utilities. Contraptions are going to be your machines, your vehicles, your tanks, your flying vehicles, anything that's mechanized. These guys are going to have a much wider base size option because the footprint for your models is going to be a little bit different than it is for your single miniatures. For example, if we're going to do this Lego Separatist army, a contraption might be one of these vulture droids. It's got a much bigger size than a lot of your other miniatures, but it also has a little bit different of a purpose. These guys also get 14 skill points, kind of like your characters, but that's just because they have a lot of flexibility on whether they're going to be bringing troops into battle, whether they're going to be your tankers, whether they're going to be your heavy hitters, whatnot. And they're also going to be a little bit pricier in terms of points because they have so much different utility. Contraptions are always going to be a machine type unit. We're going to look at what that means in the next part. Every one of these units, regardless of whether it's a character, squad, minion, or contraption, is also going to get a category assigned to it. These, like I mentioned with contraptions, could be machine, flesh, undead, plant, beast, demonic, or deific. This really covers the swath of pretty much whatever kind of setting or model or unit or imagination that you've put together for your army. Categories don't immediately change really anything about your units, but they work into internal balancing when it comes to characteristics. Instead of letting any unit take any characteristic, creating the potential for some kind of broken combos, categories help narrow down which characteristics can be taken by which units and which units can be on the receiving end of special bonuses and abilities from certain types of units. So mostly it's a thematic and internal consistency thing. But as we get into the second video on unit creation, you'll see that it does have some thematic and mechanical impact on choosing those abilities.